The deep space was silent, cold, endless. The auxiliary science vessel, the Elaris, floated in the darkness, its lights flickering weakly. Inside, the crew worked desperately to fix their failing systems. Captain Virik Solon, a tall auxiliary with smooth silver-blue skin and 4 sharp eyes, stood near the main console, his hands tight around the controls. His crew, a team of 7, moved swiftly around him. Panic was clear in their glowing yellow eyes. "The engines are dead," said Terran, the ship's engineer. "The power core is failing. If we don't find a solution soon, we'll be lost." Virik closed his eyes for a moment. This was not how their journey was supposed to end. They were a scientific crew, traveling to the outer regions of the galaxy to study ancient ruins. But a sudden energy surge from a cosmic storm had damaged their ship beyond repair. Now they were stranded in deep space, light years away from any auxiliary colony. Their distress beacon had been broadcasting for days, but there was no response. The surrounding space was empty, no ships, no planets, nothing but endless stars. Hope was slipping away. "Captain," said another crew member, Sira, her voice shaking, "we're running out of time. Oxygen levels are dropping. We have only a few days left before life support shuts down." A heavy silence filled the room. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they all knew the truth. If no one answered their signal soon, they would die here. Then something unexpected happened. Beep. A faint signal appeared on their screen. It was weak, barely noticeable, but it was there, a response to their distress call. The crew gasped. Someone had heard them. Terran quickly adjusted the scanners, trying to locate the source of the signal. "It's coming from an old human ship." Virik's eyes narrowed. "A human ship? That's impossible. Humans disappeared from this sector centuries ago." The humans were a race that once traveled the stars, exploring and expanding, much like the auxiliary. But for unknown reasons, they vanished from deep space long ago. Some believed they had destroyed themselves. Others thought they had simply moved beyond known space, searching for something greater. But now, against all logic, a human vessel floated nearby, still active. "It looks abandoned," said Sira. "No life signs detected. It has been drifting for a long time." Virik hesitated. The auxiliary did not trust human technology. It was old, unpredictable, and dangerous. Yet they had no other choice. If the ship still had power, they could use it to repair their own. "We're going in," Virik decided. "Prepare a boarding team." A ghost ship in the void. The auxiliary boarding shuttle approached the human vessel carefully. The ship was large, rusted, and covered in asteroid dust. It had once been a proud Explorer-class starship, but now it was a ghost, forgotten by time. The name on the hull was barely visible. Ulysses Valiant. Sira shivered. "This ship is over 300 years old. How is it still operational?" Terran checked the readings. Some systems are still active. There is minimal power, but something is keeping the ship alive. The auxiliary team entered through an emergency airlock. The inside of the ship was dark, filled with floating dust. The air was stale, but still breathable. Flashlights illuminated broken control panels and rusted walls. The place felt empty, yet somehow watched. Virik led the way, his sharp eyes scanning for anything useful. "Search for the power core. If we can transfer its energy to the Elaris, we might have a chance." As they moved deeper into the ship, Sira suddenly stopped. "Captain, I think you need to see this." She was standing in front of a cryopod. The glass was foggy, but inside, they could see the shape of a human. A man, frozen in time. Terran's voice was barely a whisper. Impossible. A human. Alive. Virik stepped closer, examining the cryopod's controls. The systems were still functioning, keeping the man in perfect stasis. He looked strong, his body well preserved despite the centuries that had passed. "Who is he?" Sira asked, her voice filled with awe. Virik studied the faded nameplate on the pod. The words were old, scratched, but still readable. Captain Daniel Hayes. Silence filled the room. A real, living human. Something no Xilari had seen in generations. "What do we do?" Terran asked, nervous. Virik hesitated. Humans were known to be unpredictable, dangerous even. But right now, they were desperate. And if this man had survived this long, he might have the knowledge they needed to escape. With a deep breath, Virik made his decision. Wake him up. The cryopod hissed as the ancient machine came to life. Frost melted from the glass, revealing the man inside, Captain Daniel Hayes. His face was calm, his body still as the systems worked to wake him from his long sleep. The Xilari crew stood in tense silence, watching. "Are we sure this is a good idea?" Sira whispered, her 4 glowing eyes filled with uncertainty. "We don't have a choice," Captain Virik replied. "He is the only human we have ever found. If he knows how to repair this ship, we might have a chance to survive." The pod's control panel beeped. Readings showed the human's body temperature rising, his heart beating once more. Then, with a loud exhale, his eyes opened. A man out of time. Daniel gasped, his lungs filling with air after centuries in stasis. His muscles ached, his mind foggy. He blinked, adjusting to the dim light. The last thing he remembered was boarding the U.S. Valiant on a deep space mission. But now, something was different. His vision cleared, and he saw them. The aliens. Tall, silver-blue beings with 4 glowing yellow eyes and smooth skin, wearing sleek uniforms. They looked advanced, intelligent, but also cautious. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He forced his aching body to sit up, scanning the room. His mind raced. Who were they? Where was his crew? How long had he been asleep? Virik stepped forward. "Can you understand me?" His voice was calm but firm. Daniel stared at him for a moment, then nodded. His throat was dry, but he managed to speak. "Yeah, I can understand you. Who are you? What year is it?" Sira glanced at the ship's old logs and hesitated. "Your ship has been drifting for over 300 years. Daniel's heart pounded. 300 years. That meant everyone he had ever known was gone. His crew, his family, his entire world. He swallowed hard. Now wasn't the time to break down. He needed answers. "And you are?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. "We are Xilari," Virik said. "Our ship is stranded. Our engines are dead, and we are running out of time. We found you by accident. But now, we need your help." Daniel took a deep breath, his old training returning. He didn't know these aliens. He didn't know if he could trust them. But if they were telling the truth, they were in danger. And if there was one thing humans never did, it was leave someone to die when they could help. He clenched his fists and nodded. "All right, show me your ship." A broken vessel and a daring plan. The Xilari led Daniel back to the Ilaris. The moment he stepped inside, he could feel the tension. The air was thin. The lights flickered. The hum of the ship was weak, barely alive. Daniel ran a hand through his messy hair. "Yeah, this ship is dying." Terran, the ship's engineer, frowned. "We know that. Can you fix it?" Daniel smirked. "Depends. Show me the engine room." The Xilari hesitated. Humans had a reputation in ancient galactic records. Brave, unpredictable, and stubborn beyond reason. But right now, that stubbornness might be the only thing keeping them alive. In the engine room, Daniel studied the damage. The power core was completely drained. The energy conduits were fried. If they didn't find a way to restart the core, the ship would be dead within days. Sira looked at him. "Well, can you repair it?" Daniel crossed his arms, thinking. "I can't fix it, but I can restart it." Virik frowned. "How?" Daniel turned to them, his eyes sharp. "Your ship has an emergency energy converter, right? We can siphon power from my ship's backup systems and jumpstart your core. But there's a risk. Turin narrowed his eyes. What kind of risk? Daniel sighed. If we miscalculate the energy transfer, the core might overload and explode. A heavy silence filled the room. If the plan failed, they wouldn't just be stranded. They would be dead. Sira whispered, "There has to be another way." Daniel shook his head. "There isn't. This is our best shot. But I'll need your trust." Virik studied him. This human had just woken up from a 3-century sleep. Yet he was already thinking of solutions, already trying to fight for survival. Just like the old legends said. Finally, Virik nodded. "All right. We follow your lead." Race against time. Daniel wasted no time. He guided the auxiliary crew as they connected cables from the Valiant to the Illyris. Sparks flew as energy surged between the two ships. Alarms blared. Readings fluctuated wildly. The power core struggled to absorb the new energy. "We're hitting critical levels," Turin shouted. "Hold it steady," Daniel ordered, gripping the controls. The ship trembled. The core glowed brighter, pulsing as it fought to stabilize. 10%, 20%, 30%. Then, boom. A power surge rocked the ship. The lights flickered, then stabilized. The humming sound of a revived engine filled the air. Sira gasped. "It's working. It's working." The auxiliary crew erupted in relief. They weren't going to die. Not today. Virik turned to Daniel, his yellow eyes full of something new, respect. "You just saved us." Daniel smirked, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, well, get used to it." The hum of the Illyris's engines filled the air, weak but alive. For the first time in days, there was hope. The auxiliary crew moved quickly, stabilizing power levels and running system diagnostics. In the control room, Captain Virik stood beside Daniel Hayes, watching the monitors. The human had done something incredible. He had restarted a dead ship using an ancient vessel's backup energy. No auxiliary engineer would have even attempted it. "You just bought us time," Virik admitted. Daniel, still catching his breath, smirked. "Yeah, well, you're not out of trouble yet." Turin, the ship's chief engineer, interrupted. "The power core is stable, but our engines are still too weak for a jump. We need a stronger energy source to get full propulsion." Daniel frowned. "How much power are we talking about?" Turin hesitated. "At least 10 times what your ship provided." Daniel sighed, rubbing his face. "Great. Any ideas where we find that kind of power in the middle of nowhere?" Sira, the ship's navigator, spoke up. "There is one possibility." She tapped a few buttons, and a holographic map appeared. "A pulsar star is nearby." Daniel's eyebrows raised. "A pulsar?" Sira nodded. "It emits powerful energy waves. If we position the ship just right, we can absorb some of that energy." Turin looked uneasy. "That's insane. The radiation alone could fry our systems. And if we get too close..." Daniel grinned. "Then we get turned into space dust." The crew fell silent. No sane pilot would willingly take a damaged ship near a pulsar. The energy output was extreme. The gravitational forces unpredictable. One mistake, and they would be pulled in, crushed instantly. Virik studied Daniel. "You've faced worse odds before, haven't you?" Daniel shrugged. "Let's just say humans have a habit of surviving impossible situations." Virik exhaled. "Then let's make history." Into the storm. With systems barely holding together, the Illyris moved toward the pulsar. The closer they got, the more violent the space around them became. Radiation flares burst from the spinning neutron star, waves of energy shaking the ship. Daniel stood at the controls, his hand steady. "How close do we need to get?" Sira checked the readings. 100 kilometers from the core. Any closer, and the ship will break apart. Daniel let out a slow whistle. Not much room for error. Turin muttered, "This is madness." Daniel smirked. Yeah, welcome to human problem solving. Virik gave the order. Begin the maneuver. Sira's hands flew across the console. The ship tilted, adjusting its course. The pulsar's energy pounded against the shields, pushing them to their limits. Shield strength at 40%. Terran mourned. Hold it together, Virik commanded. Daniel watched the energy levels climb. The ship's collectors began absorbing the pulsar's radiation, converting it into raw power. It was working. Then, an unexpected energy surge. Incoming wave, Sira shouted. A massive flare erupted from the pulsar, heading straight for them. It was too fast, too strong. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He grabbed the controls. What are you doing? Virik yelled. Saving your ship. Daniel's voice was calm, focused. With precise movements, he tilted the ship just enough to let the energy wave pass around them instead of hitting directly. The ship shook violently, but it didn't break. Shield strength critical. Turin yelled. Daniel ignored him. He pushed the engines, riding the edge of the pulsar's gravity. Every second counted. The power levels spiked. The energy collectors overflowed. We have enough power. Sira cried. We can jump. Virik didn't hesitate. Initiate jump. Now. Escape and aftermath. The moment the ship had enough power, Sira activated the jump drive. A blinding flash filled the cockpit as the Illyris broke free from the pulsar's pull. For a few tense moments, everything was silent. Then, the ship stabilized. The crew exhaled in relief. The pulsar was far behind them. They had survived. Daniel leaned back, grinning. Now that was fun. Turin shook his head. Humans are insane. Sira laughed. I think I'm starting to like it. Virik turned to Daniel, his yellow eyes serious. You saved us again. Twice now. Daniel simply shrugged. Guess I'm making a habit of it. But in the back of his mind, he knew something. This was just the beginning. The galaxy wasn't done with him yet. The Illyris drifted smoothly through space, finally out of danger from the pulsar. The ship's systems were stable, the crew breathing easier. But despite their victory, Captain Daniel Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He stood in the command center, arms crossed, watching the blinking screens. All right, we survived the pulsar. Now tell me what else is broken. Sira checked the readings. Engines are stable. Shields are at 30%, slowly recharging. Life support is holding. We should be fine for now. Daniel nodded, but his gut told him there was more. And the bad news. Terran, the ship's engineer, sighed. Our energy signature spiked when we absorbed power from the pulsar. If anyone was nearby, they saw us. Daniel's stomach tightened. You're saying we lit up like a beacon? Virik, the auxiliary captain, frowned. Exactly. And out here, that kind of signal attracts attention. The wrong kind. An unwanted guest. Their fears were confirmed moments later. An alarm blared. Sira's hands flew over the controls. Incoming vessel. Unknown class. Daniel stepped forward. Show me. A holographic image appeared. The ship was dark, angular, and fast, built for hunting, not exploration. Turin cursed. Scavengers. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Pirates. Virik nodded grimly. Worse. They're slavers. They raid weak ships, take survivors as prisoners, and sell them to the highest bidder. Daniel's jaw tightened. They think we're weak. The scavenger ship changed course, heading straight for them. A message came through, crackling with distortion. Unidentified vessel. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will not be tolerated. Silence filled the bridge. The auxiliary crew looked at their captain, waiting for his response. Daniel, however, was already thinking. He knew what slavers were like, bullies who preyed on the defenseless. No way in hell, he muttered. Virik turned to him. What are you thinking? Daniel's lips curled into a smirk. They expect an easy target. Let's show them they're wrong. A human plan. That Scifi weren't warriors. They were explorers, scientists. Fighting wasn't in their nature. But Daniel, he had been a soldier once. Do we have weapons? He asked. Terran hesitated. We have 2 plasma cannons, but they're old and weak. They won't do much against a fully armed scavenger ship. Daniel tapped his fingers on the control panel. Then we don't fight fair. Sira looked at him. What do you mean? Daniel grinned. We bait them in, make them think we're surrendering. Then when they try to dock, boom. Terran's eyes widened. You're suggesting we set a trap? Exactly. Virik crossed his arms, considering. A risky plan. Daniel shrugged. So is getting sold as slaves. Virik exhaled. Do it. The trap is set. The Ilaris slowed, pretending to comply. The scavenger ship moved in, confident in their superiority. Inside the auxiliary ship, Daniel worked fast. They rerouted power to the plasma cannons, making them seem offline. Terran rigged the airlock doors with an energy charge. The moment they dock, Daniel explained, we overload the doors and blast them with a shockwave. It won't destroy their ship, but it'll disable their systems long enough for us to hit them where it hurts. Virik watched the human in action, impressed. You act like you've done this before. Daniel smirked. Let's just say humans know how to deal with pirates. The battle begins. The scavenger ship latched onto the Ilaris's docking bay, cutting through the airlock. Daniel watched the screen, heart pounding. Wait for it. Wait. Now. Terran hit the switch. A massive energy pulse surged through the docking bay, sending a shockwave through the enemy ship. Sparks flew, systems overloaded, and alarms blared. Daniel didn't wait. Fire. The Ilaris's cannons roared to life, unleashing a concentrated blast at the enemy's engines. The scavenger ship jerked violently, its thrusters failing. Direct hit, Sira shouted. The slavers panicked. Their ship was crippled, their weapons offline. A second message came through. We surrender. We surrender. Daniel leaned forward, voice cold. Then get the hell out of here. The scavengers didn't argue. They detached from the Ilaris, their ship limping away into deep space. A tense silence filled the bridge. Then, cheers erupted. They had won. Virik turned to Daniel, shaking his head in disbelief. That was impressive. Daniel smirked. Told you. Humans don't like losing. Sira laughed. I think I understand why your species was feared. Daniel stretched, feeling the adrenaline fade. All right. Who's making coffee? The crew chuckled. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were fighting back. But Daniel knew one thing. This wouldn't be the last fight. The Ilaris moved silently through the darkness of space, leaving the scavengers far behind. The battle was over, but the crew was still on edge. Daniel Hayes leaned back in his chair, staring at the blinking lights on the control panel. They had won, but for how long? Sira, the navigator, broke the silence. We need to find a safe place to repair the ship. Terran, the engineer, nodded. The damage isn't too bad, but the airlock is unstable. If we take another hit, we might not be able to keep the atmosphere sealed. Virik, the captain, exhaled. There's an asteroid field nearby. It might have resources we can use. Daniel crossed his arms. Sounds risky, but I like risky. Virik smirked. I thought you might. The silent graveyard. The Ilaris drifted into the asteroid field. Massive rocks floated like silent giants, their surfaces scared by time. Some asteroids were hollow, others covered in frozen ice. Daniel scanned the area. Looks clear. No signs of scavengers. Sira checked her readings. There's a large asteroid up ahead. I'm detecting metal structures inside. Terran's eyes widened. A wreck. Virik frowned. Possibly. If it's an old ship, It might have salvageable parts. Daniel smirked. Or trouble. The crew exchanged glances. They had no choice. They needed supplies. Ghosts of war. As they got closer, the wreckage became clearer. It wasn't just one ship. It was several, all broken and lifeless. Sira whispered, This was a battlefield. Turin scanned the remains. Some of these ships are centuries old, but some look recent. Daniel felt a chill. Something bad happened here. Do we have weapons? He asked. Turin hesitated. We have 2 plasma cannons, but they're old and weak. They won't do much against a fully armed scavenger ship. Daniel tapped his fingers on the control panel. Then we don't fight fair. Sira looked at him. What do you mean? Daniel grinned. We bait them in, make them think we're surrendering. Then when they try to dock, boom. Terran's eyes widened. You're suggesting we set a trap? Exactly. Virik crossed his arms, considering. A risky plan. Daniel shrugged. So is getting sold as slaves. Virik exhaled. Do it. The trap is set. The Ilaris slowed, pretending to comply. The scavenger ship moved in, confident in their superiority. Inside the auxiliary ship, Daniel worked fast. They rerouted power to the plasma cannons, making them seem offline. Turin rigged the airlock doors with an energy charge. The moment they dock, Daniel explained, we overload the doors and blast them with a shockwave. It won't destroy their ship, but it'll disable their systems long enough for us to hit them where it hurts. Virik watched the human in action, impressed. You act like you've done this before. Daniel smirked. Let's just say humans know how to deal with pirates. The battle begins. The scavenger ship latched onto the Ilaris's docking bay, cutting through the airlock. Daniel watched the screen, heart pounding. Wait for it. Wait. Now. Turin hit the switch. A massive energy pulse surged through the docking bay, sending a shockwave through the enemy ship. Sparks flew, systems overloaded, and alarms blared. Daniel didn't wait. Fire. The Ilaris's cannons roared to life, unleashing a concentrated blast at the enemy's engines. The scavenger ship jerked violently, its thrusters failing. Direct hit, Sira shouted. The slavers panicked. Their ship was crippled, their weapons offline. A second message came through. We surrender. We surrender. Daniel leaned forward, voice cold. Then get the hell out of here. The scavengers didn't argue. They detached from the Ilaris, their ship limping away into deep space. A tense silence filled the bridge. Then, cheers erupted. They had won. Virik turned to Daniel, shaking his head in disbelief. That was impressive. Daniel smirked. Told you. Humans don't like losing. Sira laughed. I think I understand why your species was feared. Daniel stretched, feeling the adrenaline fade. All right. Who's making coffee? The crew chuckled. For the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were fighting back. But Daniel knew one thing. This wouldn't be the last fight. The Ilaris moved silently through the darkness of space, leaving the scavengers far behind. The battle was over, but the crew was still on edge. Daniel Hayes leaned back in his chair, staring at the blinking lights on the control panel. They had won, but for how long? Sira, the navigator, broke the silence. We need to find a safe place to repair the ship. Terran, the engineer, nodded. The damage isn't too bad, but the airlock is unstable. If we take another hit, we might not be able to keep the atmosphere sealed. Virik, the captain, exhaled. There's an asteroid field nearby. It might have resources we can use. Daniel crossed his arms. Sounds risky, but I like risky. Virik smirked. I thought you might. The silent graveyard. The Ilaris drifted into the asteroid field. Massive rocks floated like silent giants, their surfaces scared by time. Some asteroids were hollow, others covered in frozen ice. Daniel scanned the area. Looks clear. No signs of scavengers. Sierra checked her readings. There's a large asteroid up ahead. I'm detecting metal structures inside. Terran's eyes widened. A wreck. Virik frowned. Possibly. If it's an old ship, it might have salvageable parts. Daniel smirked. Or trouble. The crew exchanged glances. They had no choice. They needed supplies. Ghosts of war. As they got closer, the wreckage became clearer. It wasn't just one ship. It was several, all broken and lifeless. Sierra whispered, This was a battlefield. Terran scanned the remains. Some of these ships are centuries old, but some look recent. Daniel felt a chill. Something bad happened here. The Ilaris landed on a flat surface of the largest wreck. The crew suited up and stepped out, their boots clanking against metal. The inside of the wreck was a graveyard. Broken consoles, flickering lights, rusted doors hanging open. It was a silent reminder of a forgotten war. Daniel ran a hand along the wall. Whoever they were, they didn't go down without a fight. Virik nodded. Let's not join them. Move quickly. An unexpected discovery. Terran found a power module still intact. This could work. It's not perfect, but it'll stabilize our systems. Sierra checked a terminal. There's an old data log here. I might be able to access it. Daniel stood beside her. Might tell us what happened. She tapped a few buttons, and a distorted voice crackled through the speakers. This is Commander Rethan of the Silurian fleet. We were ambushed. Unknown enemy. No survivors. Then silence. Terran shivered. No survivors. Then who attacked them? Before anyone could answer, a sound echoed through the wreck. A metallic thud. Daniel's instincts flared. We're not alone. Virik's hand moved to his weapon. Move out. Now. The hunter in the dark. The crew hurried back toward the ship, but the sounds grew louder. A shadow moved in the hallway. Daniel raised his weapon. Show yourself. Silence. Then, a blur of motion. A figure lunged from the darkness, its body sleek and insect-like, with glowing red eyes. Not a machine. Not organic. Something in between. It was a survivor. Or worse, a remnant of the battle. Still hunting. Virik fired first. The shot hit, but the creature barely flinched. Daniel grabbed a nearby pipe and swung. Metal crashed against metal, sending the creature stumbling. Sierra pulled out her scanner. It's not fully alive. It's an old combat drone, but it's adapting. Terran cursed. That means it's learning how to fight us. Daniel gritted his teeth. Then we don't give it time. The fight for survival. The creature charged again, its claws slicing through the air. Daniel ducked, rolled, and fired a shot at its leg. A direct hit. The creature staggered. Virik aimed for the head. One precise shot. And the creature collapsed. For a moment, silence filled the wreckage. Then, a new sound. More thuds. More movement. Terran's face went pale. There are more of them. Sierra pointed at a blinking light. They're waking up. The wreck's security system must have activated them. Daniel grabbed Terran's arm. Time to go. The crew ran, dodging as more of the creatures emerged from the shadows. One leaped at them. Daniel spun and kicked it back. Another reached for Virik. Sierra blasted it away. Finally, they reached the Ilaris. The doors hissed shut behind them. Terran slammed the controls. Engines are online. Let's get out of here. The ship lifted off, thrusters burning bright. The creatures swarmed the wreck, their red eyes glowing in the dark. But they were too late. The Ilaris was already gone. The warning. As they left the asteroid field, Daniel sat in the control room, breathing heavily. Sierra spoke first. That wreck, it wasn't just an old battlefield. It was a warning. Virik's expression darkened. Someone, or something, left those drones behind. And they're still out there. Daniel looked at the stars. Then we better be ready, because whatever had wiped out that fleet was still waiting. The Illyris sped away from the asteroid field, its engines burning bright against the darkness of space. The wreckage behind them faded into the distance, but the memory of the red-eyed machines still haunted the crew. Daniel Hayes sat in the command center, staring at the screen. His mind replayed the fight with the drones. They weren't just old war machines. They were something more. Virak stood beside him, arms crossed. That battlefield was not abandoned by accident. Someone left those machines there, waiting. Sira, still shaken, whispered, "But waiting for what?" Nobody had an answer. A message from the void. As the crew tried to recover, a sudden beep filled the room. Sira checked the controls. "We're picking up a transmission." Daniel frowned. "From where?" She typed quickly. "Unknown origin. It's using an old military frequency." Turin leaned forward. Could it be survivors from the wreck? Virak shook his head. Unlikely. That battlefield was dead. Daniel exhaled. "Play it." The speakers crackled, and a voice filled the room. Distorted, weak, but urgent. "Warning. They are coming. You must leave this sector. They do not stop. They do not feel. They..." Static. Then, silence. A race against time. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Terran swallowed hard. That was a distress signal. Whoever sent it, they knew something. Virak checked the navigation system. "We're still deep in uncharted space. If there's a danger here, we need to get out before we attract attention." Daniel wasn't convinced. "If there's a threat, we need to know what we're up against." Virak studied him. Humans and their curiosity. Daniel smirked. "Hey, it keeps us alive." Sira interrupted. "I traced the signal source. It's coming from a derelict station nearby." Daniel made his decision. "Then we check it out. Quick in and out." Virak sighed. "I was afraid you'd say that." The abandoned station. The Illyris approached the floating station, a massive metal structure drifting in the void. It was ancient, covered in scars from battles long forgotten. Sira scanned it. No signs of life. Terran frowned. "That doesn't mean it's safe." Daniel put on his helmet. "We won't know unless we go in." Inside the darkness. The station's airlock groaned as it opened. Daniel led the team inside, weapons ready. Their footsteps echoed in the empty halls. Flickering lights cast eerie shadows. Broken consoles lined the walls. Everything was silent. Too silent. Sira checked a monitor. "Power is low, but I might be able to access the station's logs." Daniel nodded. "Do it fast." She typed quickly. The screen lit up. A final entry appeared. "This is Captain Orlin. We fought as long as we could. They are not alive, not dead. Machines of war, no weakness. We sealed the last survivors in Creo. If anyone finds this, do not wake them." Daniel's eyes widened. "Cryo." Turin pointed ahead. "There." A heavy door marked TROSLEP chamber stood at the end of the corridor. Daniel hesitated. The warning was clear. Do not wake them. But he had to see for himself. The frozen survivors. The door hissed open. Inside, rows of cryopods lined the walls. Most were dark, their occupants long gone, but a few still flickered with life. Virak examined them. "These people have been asleep for decades." Sira checked the readings. Their life signs are weak, but stable. Daniel exhaled. If they're still alive, they might have answers. Turin hesitated. But what if waking them is a mistake? Before anyone could decide, a new sound echoed through the station. A distant metallic thud. Then another. Virak's eyes narrowed. "We have company." The machines return. The thudding grew louder, faster. Sira's face went pale. Something is moving, inside the walls. Daniel gritted his teeth. They followed us. Turin cursed. The machines. They're waking up. Suddenly, a cryopod opened on its own. A figure collapsed to the floor, a pale-skinned alien, gasping for breath. His eyes darted around wildly before locking onto Daniel. "You fools. You've doomed us all." Before Daniel could ask what he meant, the walls burst open. The machines were here. The walls burst open with a deafening crash, and the red-eyed machines poured into the chamber like a nightmare awakened. Their metallic limbs clanked against the floor, their glowing eyes locked onto their prey. Daniel Hayes raised his weapon, his heart pounding. This was it, the final fight. The alien they had just awakened from the cryopod gasped for air, his eyes filled with fear. "You don't understand. You've brought them here. They won't stop." Daniel didn't have time to argue. The machines were already charging. The battle begins. Virik, the captain, didn't hesitate. He fired the first shot, a blast of energy hitting the nearest machine. Sparks flew, but it barely slowed down. Turin grabbed a metal rod from the floor and swung it at another, knocking it back. They're strong, but they can be damaged. Sira dodged an incoming strike and shouted, "We need to get out of here. We can't fight all of them." Daniel clenched his jaw. She was right. They were outnumbered, and the station was falling apart. He turned to the alien. "Who are you? How do we stop them?" The alien's breathing was ragged. They were built for war, but they were never shut down. "They keep hunting." The machines shrieked. They understood what was happening, and they weren't going to let them leave. The escape. The crew ran, dodging attacks as they raced through the crumbling station. The red-eyed machines were everywhere, climbing the walls, dropping from the ceiling. Daniel fired at a drone that leaped in front of him. It exploded in a shower of sparks. Virik caught another machine trying to grab Sira and blasted it apart. Turin smashed one with his metal rod, but another one tackled him. He struggled, gasping as the machine's claws closed around his throat. Daniel grabbed a loose power cable and jammed it into the machine's back. A surge of electricity sent it twitching before it collapsed. Turin coughed, pushing the wreckage off him. "I hate these things." 3 o'clock, 2:59, 2:58. They reached the final corridor. The airlock to their ship was in sight. But standing between them and escape was a massive machine, larger than the rest. Its armor was thick, its eyes burning like fire. The leader. The final fight. The machine lunged. Daniel rolled aside, dodging its clawed hand. He fired, but the shots bounced off its armor. Turin grabbed a piece of debris and swung it. The machine barely noticed. Sira's voice crackled through their comms. "We have less than 2 minutes. Get to the ship." Daniel gritted his teeth. They couldn't run. Not yet. His eyes darted around, searching for a weakness. Then, he saw it. A damaged fuel pipe near the ceiling. He turned to Virik. "Shoot the pipe." Virik nodded and fired. Boom. The fuel pipe erupted in flames, sending a burst of fire directly onto the machine. It screeched, metal melting under the heat. Daniel didn't wait. He grabbed Turin and ran. 1 o'clock, 0:59, 0:58. They reached the airlock. Sira had already started the ship. The alien turned back toward the station. "You should have let me sleep." Daniel grabbed his arm. No time for regrets. "Move." The airlock sealed shut. The end of the nightmare. The Elaris blasted away from the station, thrusters burning bright. Behind them, the station trembled, explosions ripping through its structure. And then, boom. The entire station erupted in a massive fireball, metal and debris scattering in all directions. The red-eyed machines were gone. For now. A new beginning. Daniel leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Sira turned from the controls. "We did it." Turin exhaled. Barely. Virik looked at the alien. "What's your name?" The alien hesitated. Orlin. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Captain Orlin. From the distress signal, the alien nodded. I tried to warn you, but now they're truly gone. Daniel wasn't sure about that. Somewhere, in the darkness of space, there could be more of those machines, more secrets, more threats. But for now, they had survived, and that was enough.